Five, four, three, two, one. We have ignition. In your face, all over the place. We're online 24/7. You're listening to the hottest internet station.
From beautiful Saline in southeastern Michigan.
Around the world at freedomtalkradio.net.
This is the 2009 Top 10 Webcam in the World winner. This is SETV.
Well, good evening, everybody. Bill Zam here. Welcome to yet another exciting episode of Surrounded by Idiots, starring me, Bill Zam. We have a guest for tonight, sort of a last-minute guest that sort of volunteered to come on the show and shed some light on some news stories that have been going around that we are going to be talking about tonight. I will give everybody a fair warning. Twice today, I have completely lost my voice. The first time was when the wife and I went out to a movie this morning, and all of a sudden my voice was gone, and the second time was this afternoon. So at any time, the microphone may become silent, and the guest will be the host at that point. So, that being said, there are a couple of things that I wanted to open up the show with. Incidentally, if you're at freedomtalkradio.net or at Spreaker.com listening to the audio side of the program, go to freedomtalkradio.net and click the link at the top of the main page, and you can go to where the video stream is, which is where my lovely face is right now, and we will, of course, have the usual photographs and show notes and everything else. Now, you know, a few weeks ago, I was talking to another guest on the phone. Our phone is one of those IP phones that come as a bundle by a large cable company, and I'll leave it at that. And we were talking about a particular product that he needed for his business that I have experience with. And about a half an hour later, believe it or not, I started seeing ads on every website that I went to for that exact damn product. It's not the first time it's happened. I've heard this from other people. I'm tired of going to every single website and having ads shoved in my face about products that I have been looking for. I'm tired of it, and I'm sure most of you are tired of it as well. And this political correctness stuff is starting to get a little bit out of hand worldwide right now. There's been articles recently about how another flurry of pages have been taken down off of Facebook. I read an article this week about how LinkedIn, the supposedly professional social networking website, gathers more personal data than any other of the social network websites. We see pages getting taken down, people being censored, people being thrown offline, videos being taken down, and everything else. And Andy and I, my business partner, Andy Peacher over there in the UK, his Facebook page for the Freedom Talk Radio, by the way, was defaced a couple of weeks ago. So we're tired of it. And what we've decided to do is go at it from our own angle and do something that should have been done a long time ago, and every time I mention it to people, people say, yeah, I suppose. And nobody ever does anything about it, so we've taken the bull by the horns, and we've done it. Wolfhoundhybrids.com is where it is right now. Wolfhoundhybrids.com. Go there and see what you think, and as we add more members, we will be adding to the capabilities. No ads, no tracking cookies, no nothing, just like it's supposed to be. Now, this past week, there was a lot of breathless reporting that the Russians, let me throw the show notes up here so you can follow along at home. There's been some breathless reporting over the past week that the Russians are banning the Americans from the International Space Station, and oh yeah, they're not going to let us use any more of their rockets that blow up. And when the show notes go up on the website, I've got 2 links of examples of that. Including one right here at townhall.com. and it details how the Russians aren't going to let us use the space station anymore. And over here on this website, which is Breitbart, they actually give you the correct information and throw in the year 2020 as the year they're not going to let us use a space station anymore. The supposition that I'm proceeding from is that, as usual, the story we're being told isn't what is really going on. It never is, and it never will be. And I believe that that summation is correct. For when I look at the teeny tiny print, you see the words 2020, and you see the Russians are the ones that own the access to the space station, the foyer, if you would like. And they're planning on taking their parts and making a nice new space station with them, something called the Orbital Piloted Assembly and Experiment Complex that we're going to talk about in a little while. While this story is important to us that follow the space programs, I believe this affair is systemic to a deeper problem that we currently have. And as usual, with stories like this, we'll be told the lie often enough until it becomes the latest, well, everybody knows that, from the kings and queens of mumbo-jumbo. So let's make the Russians look like even more like the bad guys. We'll tell the low information people that the Russians are not letting us on the space station and just leave out the part about 2020. I've thought, since it actually happened, that retiring the space shuttle was a really bad idea. So one has to ask, who exactly is a genius that decided spending all those millions of dollars for rides on the Soviet-Russian rockets was a good move? In my opinion, and from my observations using my cranial cavity for the intended purpose, I've come up with a few points to ponder. And the first is taking into account a lot of the hair-trigger decisions that are being made. I see a style of thinking here. For the past decade or so, each administration that comes into power seems to pull the trigger before new technology is ready. So it's, let's retire the shuttle. So what? We don't have a replacement. We'll take advantage of the Russians for a few years. It's all good. And what we're going to do next, we're going to get rid of the Tomahawk and the Hellfire, our two most successful weapon systems. So what? We don't have a replacement yet, but there isn't going to be any need for it. Well, what, are we going to have a war with the Russians? We're all one big, happy New World Order family, apparently. Of course, in the world of tit for tat, it might be perfectly fine to propose something like that and keep the $1 million toilet seats or the $50,000 hammers. There has been and still seems to be either a lack of understanding or misunderstanding of the technology available, and it's getting worse. And it appears that the leaders, the ones that are actually making these decisions, are either getting incorrect information or information that is purposefully incorrect. And that is something that I think we should think about. And my guest tonight, he was only going to be here for a little while, and this is only going to be a 1-hour show because of my voice problems, and he has to get on the road because he has a photography assignment to do. His name is Lane Hermann. He has been on the show before, and when he was on the last time, he talked about this book right here, On Camera, Enterprise, Everything to Know, plus the Test Shuttles, an excellent book if you want to know the history of the space shuttles. And he has a new book that's coming out that's called SLS Space Launch System 2014. And I'm going to welcome him right now. His name is Lane Hermann. He is a journalist and a photographer in the space industry. Lane, how are you doing?
Thank you, Bill. I'm doing just fine. It's been a crazy week for everybody.
Yes, it has. I understand you had a little bit of an explosion.
No, the Russians had an explosion.
Yes, the Proton rocket.
Yes. They build their rockets so well that it was a Proton M rocket. It's their fifth rocket that they've actually lost in the last 4 years. So, way to go, Russians.
It's very disconcerting, especially since we're supposed to be riding on their rockets.
Well, fortunately, the rockets that they use for man flight those things have not changed since the 60s. It's the exact same rocket, same engines, same everything.
So it's a dependable system, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's very cramped, but yes. You don't want to get one if you're claustrophobic.
Yes. In fact,
they're very tiny.
I don't know if you saw this, but NASA broadcast the first launch of an American astronaut on one of their in the Soyuz going up to the space station. They broadcast it live, and it was very humorous because the countdown was like, okay, we're going to launch this thing. Yeah, I guess, I don't know, 30 seconds or so. And all of a sudden, they light the engines and off it goes without much of a countdown. About halfway up, they had a camera inside the space capsule. And about halfway up, the Russian controllers come on in English and say, can you move the camera so that we can get a better view of both astronauts? And I swear to God, the guy picks up a broomstick from the floor and moves the camera with the broomstick on a spaceship that's going into orbit. And I thought that was hysterical. I nearly fell off the couch when I saw that, Lane.
See, this sort of thing is very common and typical with the Russians. One of the things that is not widely known, but it's fairly known, that they put those rockets together just 48 hours before the launch. They're just laying there in pieces, waiting to be put together, before launch, and this is how they operate. They 48 hours. They start assembling the thing, and they roll it out on the train tracks and raise it up, and away we go.
And away we go.
Actually, most of the launches, when they're manned launches like that with NASA, you can actually watch them on NASA TV. You can go onto the NASA's website and go to NASA TV, and you can watch these launches. And another thing that is very common that they do, something I think was requested by NASA at this point, they actually usually hang down a stuffed animal. The very first one I saw was an Angry Birds one a year or two ago. And it was just rather humorous to see this stuffed animal hanging down. And what it is that's how they realize, or they show the audience that they've achieved orbit, because that string, it's pulling on that string, and that stuffed animal's just hanging there, and all of a sudden it'll just start to float the air.
That's
string
hysterical.
just lets go, and it just starts floating away.
That's funny, but it works apparently.
It works. It lets everybody know, yes, they've achieved orbit. They're in space.
Okay, let's. I know your time is short, so I've only got a few questions, and I'm going to start with a basic question. How is the International Space Station controlled from the ground?
Believe it or not, most of it is controlled through the American systems, which we have bases all over the world that mainly here in the U.S. and in Russia, but they're ground control stations. The Australians are, I'm very proud of the one they have, because they've been using it since Apollo. And before we had our wonderful TDRS satellites, you needed 3 of them to get all the way around the world. So our very first shuttle flights, all the way up until through the 80s, all the way till the end of the 80s, because Challenger actually had the 3rd TDS satellite on board when it was lost. We needed 3 to get up there in order to be able to communicate 100% around the world. Prior to that, if you ever watch any of the old movies or any of the old NASA footage, there was always that problem with reentry where they lost communications with the astronauts, and they had to wait for, in anticipation to see if they didn't burn up in the atmosphere. And that's what the 3 TDS satellites do, is they actually keep that constant communications. So even the shuttles throughout the entire 80s, would lose communication for a while until that satellite system was in place. That's another thing that they're talking about, too, is that we also have GPS stations in Russia. And that's one of the tools, one of the little things that they're playing with and toying with us and saying, oh, yes, we're not going to allow you to use those anymore. But we built them. We operate them there on their soil through an agreement, and the agreement's not being canceled. It's just one of those things that this is all political stuff that they're just throwing out there. Because guess what? All of this stuff, everything that you're seeing right now with Russia, has been planned for years in advance. This is all, now, do all government officials know about this? No. They're not all always paying attention even. The thing is that they just don't, they're busy politicking. The reporters aren't reporting, and it's just very strange. That's the way things go. What started all this was the whole thing with the space station, and the Russians saying, you're not allowed to go up. We're going to stop you. You can't go, or we're going to leave the space station by 2020. And there again, this all is something that has already been pre-done years in advance. You talked about earlier about the orbital piloted assembly and experimental complex. This is what the Russians plan to do as far as that's the name of their new planned space station for when they're planning to, be done with ISS. And this was an agreement that was announced on June 17th of 2009. This was publicly talked about. Now, why our media glances over this, the big media, I have no idea. But these are the facts.
Yes, and
so they already plan to abandon the space station, the International Space Station, by 2020. It's just the way it is.
Yep. On 17 June 2009, Roscosmos officially informed its ISS partner, the United States, about its intention to build and prepare for operation for the first elements of the orbital assembly and experimental piloted space station by the end of the ISS life cycle. So, from my understanding of what's going on, and for those of you watching on the video side, there's a diagram of the Russian parts of the space station on the screen right now. From my understanding is that the thing was planned to be retired in 2020, and the Russians are going to take their stuff and build a new space station. And we wanted to extend that to 2024, and it seems to me that that's where all of this started happening, this news story.
Yes, and the problem is that it gets even quirkier with this because half of those Russian modules that you're looking at there, specifically Zvezda, I believe that's how it's pronounced, it's actually owned by NASA. We paid for it with our American tax dollars. So here they are. They're wanting to go run off and build their own new space station using parts of the current International Space Station, and they don't even own these parts that they're talking about.
Yeah, it's
so another part is one of the modules that their main module that they plan on using. It's not even built yet. This is it's 10 years behind launch schedule. This particular module, it's the Nauka, Nauka. It's their science module, and this thing it was supposed to launch 10 years ago. Then they rescheduled because it wasn't finished. It was supposed to launch this year, and they just announced on Tuesday that they're not ready, and they still won't be able to launch the thing until possibly as early as 2017. So, what's Russia to do?
Two questions about that. Where is it being built, and how are they going to launch it?
Well, that's the thing, is that all these Russian modules were built in Russia. Mm-hmm. We gave them money, and we told them what we wanted in the cooperation. That was all part of the agreement that was signed mainly between the U.S. and Russia for funding the International Space Station. That was in the first term of Bill Clinton, and it was signed off by Al Gore.
Okay.
And so this is an agreement that they can't break. It's one of those things that they just we've been planning all this stuff for years in advance. And politics do enter into a lot of things when it comes, down to it. But when it comes to the agreements, they can't just up and break them. We've got things worked out far enough in advance that it's just not going to happen. There's also most people don't know that there is a space UN, a United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. This is their sole purpose, what they do. You can actually go to the website, and it talks about where they literally have meetings all the time and discuss about space and the nations that are involved that are able to actually get into space. You can't just launch a rocket. You have to let everybody else know that you're going up. And it's again, this is all part of the United Nations, and but this had started before the Cold War. Even it goes all the way back to when we back to the 50s when we had the space race going on, just starting out. This was all set up. So we can look all this stuff up, and this stuff is all planned out. And there are repercussions if somebody doesn't comply, just like in the regular UN.
Well, nobody pays any. I hate to say it, but nobody pays any attention to the repercussions in the regular UN. So why would they start now?
Well, there's too much money and cooperation involved already. As we were talking about before, or you mentioned before, it comes down to money, and it's the facts. And how we're things are worked in there. We think the governments are in control. Well, they are only to a certain extent. It's banks that are controlling things. And
of course,
there's only so much that can be done. The world is run by money, and that's the way it's been since long before we were here, and will be that way long after we're gone.
Yeah, half the audience is now going, it's always the damn banksters that are doing this. They're always saying that. His website, by the way, folks, is lanehermann.com. That's Herman spelled with two N's, lanehermann.com. There you can see a photograph of Lane right there in one of the shuttles, just before he accidentally launched it to the space station. That was a joke. He didn't really accidentally launch it, but he's a well-noted author, and I always enjoy talking to him and not only listening to his stories, but reading the books that he comes out with. And you are coming out with a new book in the near future called SLS Space Launch System 2014. So I think we should talk about our replacement for the space shuttle that nobody's hearing about.
This is rather important, obviously. I mean, everybody thinks that I've had so many people tell me, "Oh, NASA's dead, nothing's happening out there." Well, I'll tell you, I go out to NASA, out to the Cape, between 3-4 times a month because there is a lot of stuff going on out there right now. SLS stands for Space Launch System. This is the replacement for the space shuttle. Basically, it is the Apollo program on steroids. The Apollo capsules held 3 men. The Orion capsule, which is going to be on top of the rocket assembly, which is SLS, that Orion capsule holds 6 people. And it's very roomy. There you go. There it is.
Yep. And
so it's we've been working on this since 2004. We talk about the the administrations that want to change things, and yes, that does happen, and it's unfortunate because all they're doing is wasting our tax dollars at that point, because we have plans in motion, and they change very little, and it's just unfortunately wasting tax dollars when they stick their thumb in it, politically.
No.
But there's only so much we can do from our little end of things.
Except
so,
publicize it.
Yeah,
for them.
Yeah. So, yeah, I go out there frequently, and I've seen the capsule that they're working on right now for Orion. It's got, a lot of old technology that they've upgraded. It's got a lot of new technology that has never been used before, and that's where the stumbling blocks are, of course. With the new computers and stuff. The Apollo days, your phone is smarter than that. What they had in the Apollo capsules. So, your home computer, your wristwatch is very common. What NASA likes to use as an example. Your digital wristwatch, has more computer power than what the Apollo capsules had. So, obviously with today's technology, we do a lot more. And there's actually, believe it or not, going to be a test launch later on this year, with the capsule. It's going to be unmanned because they have to man-rate the vehicle. And so it's going to launch on top of a Delta IV. December 4th is the current expected date for that launch. It's going to launch out of Cape Canaveral, and it's going to do 2 orbits around the Earth and then come back down, splash into the ocean. And they're going to certify it that man can fly on it. Now, we haven't touched yet on, competitors, because everybody's saying, oh, we're completely dependent on the Russians, to get us into space right now. Well, yes and no. The other part of this is, and everybody's starting to hear more and more about a company called SpaceX. This is a private company. It has very little to do with NASA other than taking NASA's money and helping out. What they do is they've been loading and going up to the International Space Station. They've got what they call their Falcon 9 rocket, and they've got a capsule that they call Dragon. And Dragon has been loaded up with all the supplies and sent to the space station. Well, they just announced last week that they are prepared, they've got it ready now, to test their manned version of that capsule. And so this Dragon capsule is going to be launching soon, and I don't have a date on that yet because they haven't given one, but they are planning on launching their manned capsule later on this year at some point. And so they're going to get that man rated. Once they get that man rated, we can start flying our own astronauts, and that will be within the year.
Was my next question.
That was through a private contractor.
That was my next question. How soon can either the Dragon or the Orion be man-rated? And it sounds like the Dragon will be the first one.
Yes, the Dragon will be the first one. Unfortunately, that information as far as when that's going to happen. SpaceX is a private corporation, and they like to hold things close to their vests, which is understandable. So we don't have an actual date. We just have a time frame. With the Orion capsule, I already gave the date. That's December 4th. We're going to launch that puppy and get it up there into space and do a couple of orbits.
And how quickly after that will it be man-rated?
As far as Orion goes itself, to actually put man into space in the Orion capsule, we're looking at a target date of sometime in 2017.
Wow. So obviously the Dragon's going to be the first one.
Yes.
And the Dragon capsule on return, is that a water splashdown or is that a land?
We are Americans, and we do everything in the water. It's a lot safer. It's especially early on when they tested out the Orion capsule. This was back in 2006. They were actually testing out, doing a parachute drop test. Now, this new capsule, it's obviously larger and heavier than anything that NASA's ever flown before when it comes to a space capsule and when it comes to needing a parachute system. So they actually had to build literally the world's largest parachutes for it. And, of course, it has 3, just like the Apollo capsules. And the very first drop that they did out of the back of a C-17, they actually got one of the parachutes failed and got tangled. When that tangled, it got wrapped up in the other parachutes, and it actually crashed because they were talking about doing a land landing like the Russians do, landing out in the desert. And when it crashed, because obviously the parachutes had gotten tangled, the vehicle was destroyed. So they said, nope, the water's always worked well for us. We're going to stick with the water. And so that's what our plan is. And so SpaceX does water landings. We're going to continue doing water landings.
Well, that's good. I think water probably be the better way. In fact, there's I believe I have an image of the Orion capsule in the water. By the looks of things, yes, I do.
Yep, they did that testing, and they've actually built several different versions. And that particular photo, I believe, was taken in 2008, off of the coast of Florida, right off of Cape Canaveral. And so on Canaveral Air Force Station, there's also a Navy base. It's a submarine base. And there's a Coast Guard base there, and all the cruise lines come out of there as well. And the facility is already in place, and so it was easy enough to go and just take it right out into the ocean. They've also done splashdown tests in D.C. They have several facilities around the country. They actually, when you see the video of them crashing airplanes all the time, they've got that checkered wall in the background so that they can measure by the inches. And when an airplane crashes, where they intentionally crash it. They did the same thing with the Orion capsule, what we're looking at here, and splashing it down into a pool of water. So all that testing's already been done now. So we've got our flotation devices, and everything's working properly as far as they're telling us. And honestly, they really have no reason to lie about it. It's just a matter of getting us flying again.
The question, are these reusable?
No, they're not. Unfortunately, eventually it's just going to be an assembly line. If you remember any of the old photos, you had the Gemini capsules and the Apollo capsules were all lined up. They were just building them all in an assembly line. Well, we're doing the same thing with this today. I've been in the facility over on the Cape. They're working out the kinks right now on all of it, wiring up all the electronics. I do have some photos, but I haven't posted those yet anywhere. But because there's really not much to see, unfortunately. You're just seeing the inner, workings. But the heat shield, they had to design a bigger heat shield for it than the Apollo missions. But on the external skin, they're actually using an updated version, a more advanced version of space shuttle tiles. And the thing is, and I asked them specifically, I said, hey, what's so different about these tiles than the space shuttle tiles? And they told me that, and I could see it, right there as well. The space shuttle tiles were on an average between 3 to 8 inches thick, depending on where they were on the vehicle. These particular tiles, and I would have given you these pictures had I realized we were going to talk about this specifically. But these specific tiles, these new advanced tiles, are only a half-inch thick.
Wow.
That's all there is to it. But they're less expensive to make, and the vehicle is a one-time use throwaway vehicle. So, should anything happen to these tiles, on re-entry, it's not a big deal. They're just designed, for the one-time use, and they're going to protect us, our guys. That's all that matters.
And how about the Dragon? Is that a reusable system, or are they throwaways as well?
That's a throwaway system as well, at least at this point. Elon Musk, who owns SpaceX, unless he decides otherwise to refurbish any, I don't see that actually happening. I know that in California, where he has his facilities where they build the capsules, that ones that have gone up and come back, that he actually does have some on display.
Wow, that's pretty pretty cool in itself. Being able to see them that have been up in space. I've that I've been to NASA. I've seen a lot of their old Gemini and Apollo capsules that they have on display at the museum there, and so it was pretty cool to see something that's actually been into outer space and be able to touch the thing and everything. It's always a thrill for the person that hasn't been in space.
Oh, it's fabulous because so many people even if they don't have ambitions for space, it's still something that is a dream somewhere in the back of their mind. That one day this could be possible. I mean, when I was a kid, I was told at that time the Apollo program was in full swing, and I was told that by 2000 we're going to live on the moon. And as you're telling, a 5-year-old kid this, all the things that can happen in your imagination, and you just, it just sticks with you.
Yeah.
And because we're not living on the moon by, and we're past 2000 already. I'm rather disappointed.
So am I. I want my flying car too.
Yeah.
They told me I was going to have a flying car by 1988, and I haven't seen it yet. I want my flying car. And I don't know about you, and maybe you can. You probably have, since we're essentially on this topic now. Everybody has a personal bucket list, and myself, I have actually, believe it or not, accomplished everything on my bucket list except for one thing, and that's going into space. What is it with we humans that makes that a collective dream that we want to go into space?
Well, I don't think it's so much as space specifically. I think it's human nature to want to explore. Look at like Columbus and all these others that went around the world. They were just exploring and trying to find new worlds and new endeavors. Something to achieve. It's a goal, and you're not going anywhere if you don't have any goals. That's one of the things where. There again, with SpaceX and Elon Musk specifically, his dream is he wants to go to Mars. It's not just going to space. He wants to go to Mars. And he's doing everything he can to make his dream come true, and I applaud that.
Me too.
For something like that to happen, in our lifetime would be fabulous. I don't necessarily have to go myself, but, it would be nice.
Well, these days, Lane, with the high definition cameras that we have, you really don't need to. I mean, you can experience it on your television and in your living room. It's amazing.
Well, there is that, so there, especially in today's internet-based world, the communications that we have today. Last night I was at the I was on Cape Canaveral. I was 1 mile away from the Delta IV when it launched. And I've got the photos up there on my website. No, I'm sorry, I got them on my Facebook page. Sorry. I'll put them up on the website later. Okay. But I was 1 mile away from that Delta IV launch. And, there's nothing like being there. But, I do have on the website was an actual link so that people could actually watch that video live. So you in Michigan could watch that launch over the internet from the link that was on my website. What you're looking at there, that's the Atlas V. Yep. Yeah, it's some. I got all kinds of rocket launch pictures there. I said I'm out there all the time.
Yep, it's at Lane's website, Lane Hermann with 2Ns.com. He's got excellent photos there. This is his slideshow.
So, it's just basic human nature. We need to explore. We need to be doing something, a sense of accomplishment. As far as going and actually colonizing Mars, or any other planet for that matter. Why we go into space is more than just exploring. Another part is we have a population control problem, and it's not going to go away. We have a climate control problem, and I think this is another problem that cropped up this week, where we actually had an ice shelf from the Arctic break away because it's melting, and this thing is the size of the state of Rhode Island, and this, when it melts fully, because it's that's fresh water, and the seawater just continually eats at it and melts it, and it's actually going to make our sea levels rise even higher than they already are. And and this is continuing. So we can't ignore global warming anymore. We are growing in population, and we are losing our land. And so we've got to do something, and we've got to prepare. And so it may be 100 years from now, but that's our grandkids and our great grandkids, and so on and so forth. And it's just a matter of not if, it's a matter of when we have a problem, and how we're going to survive as a human race. We don't necessarily have to colonize Mars or the moon, but we have to do something.
Yes, we do. I was reading an article, and I can't remember who the quote is from, and I apologize for that. But somebody said we have to spread humanity to other planets simply because this guy's afraid of a large meteor strike killing us. And we've seen in the past few weeks articles that major meteor strikes on the Earth are 3 to 10 times more often than we originally thought. And I think there were 7 last year that, if they had landed on a major city, would have devastated the city. Well,
part of the problem is yes, this is very correct. We matter of fact, just a few weeks ago, we had a large meteor shower. And the thing is it's an annual event, but it's the meteors that we're seeing are particles from the tail of Halley's Comet.
Yes.
And now this is a comet that passed us 20 years ago, and no, I'm sorry, it's more than that. We're talking almost 35 years ago.
Was it really that long?
Yeah, because that was in '86.
Good Lord, I'm getting old. I'm getting old.
So we are still getting particles from Halley's Comet and a number of other comets that pass by us all the time. Last year, I'm sorry, it was last year. Back in this past December, we had 2 comets that circled our sun, and we were watching one specifically to see how it would fare, and it actually broke up, after it spun around the sun. And so we're eventually going to have to, as in the Earth, our own spaceship, drift through that debris, and that's going to come in the shape of meteors, hitting our planet and other planets as well. Additionally to that, we have a problem with space junk. Currently, there are about 2,500, that's 2,500 satellites up there that are working for us. What you're not hearing about are the 30,000, that's with a T, 30,000 satellites that are up there, or pieces of rockets that are dead, that they're not in use, and those can potentially turn into meteorites as well. Then we go to even more of an extreme, where we've got other low Earth particles. These are small items; they're not satellites per se. They're things like debris, that we've put up there. The Russians had a satellite. They were launching a rocket that they were launching a number of years ago that blew up in the upper atmosphere. and became low orbit debris. And occasionally, you hear about the space station where all the astronauts have to get into a safe area, and they actually have to use their jets and their propulsion system to actually move the space station to get out of the way of potential debris that could damage the space station. The parts of that rocket that exploded, that Russian rocket, and the Chinese have done this too, exploded rockets. We've had problems where we've got these paint chips, tiny paint chips, that are that much of a danger because they are flying so fast and coming at us. And if you go onto my blog, I actually have of my website, there's an actual article that tells the speed of how fast these things are going. And, a paint chip can actually, damage, our spacecraft and our, as far as whether it be manned or a satellite, to the point where it can be crippled. There was Bob, I believe it was Bob Crippen, showed me a video where they were on a space shuttle mission, and they were sitting there eating dinner, and all of a sudden they hear a pop, a pink, and they look around. They know that there's, they were hit by something. And here they are in orbit, and sure enough, they found that a paint chip had actually struck the window of the space shuttle orbiter. Now, it's 3 panes thick, and this is the windows are designed, for not only taking a hit. You could sit there and you could actually shoot it with a gun and not damage it. But these paint chips are going so fast that it actually broke through the first layer and damaged the second layer. The third layer was fine, so they didn't have a problem. They were, I can imagine them still on reentry being a little worried, flying back in. But so after that, NASA made the decision to actually fly the shuttle backwards while they were in orbit. So anytime they flew after that, they actually flew the shuttle backwards, so that if there was any, meteor-type debris, or space junk that could possibly hit and damage the orbiter, it would hit the engines, which they wouldn't be using for landing anyways.
Right.
And so one of those little-known facts that people just don't know about.
Yeah. One last thing to finish up this hour, because you've got to hit the road, and I'm surprised my voice hasn't given out, but stranger things have happened. Let's finish it up with something that's kind of fun, and that is, well, fun for me anyways.
I thought this was all fun.
Okay, there was a story a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about this before we went on the air, that NASA is shutting down all of the cameras on the International Space Station because UFOs come to visit the space station so often, and they need to keep it secret. But that isn't quite the accurate story, is it? In fact, hold on just 1 second here. I have a photograph of one of the UFOs docked at the space station on the screen right now. Apparently, this is a real-live UFO that's docked at the space station when it's probably nothing more than a bag of crap that's been ejected out of the refuse bin or whatever they use to jettison all of the debris.
Yeah, that's very true. It's people forget that hey, we're human, and we have bodily functions, and it's got to go someplace. And you hear the stories every once in a while about the blue ice falling from the sky, and that's coming from airport or airplane laboratories. You're driving down the road and you driving behind a tour bus, and all of a sudden you've got a wet windshield. Well, guess what? Somebody flushed the toilet. The space station is no different. What do when they go to the bathroom? Well, they go number one. Well, that actually, believe it or not, goes into a recycling system.
I've heard that.
Becomes they can actually filter that and becomes drinkable water because it's one of the very necessities and one of the more rare things that they have up there, and that's more difficult to replace. But when you go number two, well, guess what? they don't want that around. You don't want it around your house, so what do? You flush it. So they flush it into space.
Where it becomes
the space shuttle
debris.
is no different. The space shuttle is no different. If you ever look at a picture of the space shuttle up by the nose, by the door where the guys enter, just off to the right from that door, that's where the bathroom is. And so on the exterior of the vehicle, you'll see a yellow square and a round hole. And guess what that is?
The poop chute.
That was the flusher. So when they were flying around in space on the space shuttle, that little hole opened, when they went to flush, that hole opened up and it flew down the wing.
And there you go.
And so now you've got a turd satellite. But NASA doesn't want to advertise turd satellites.
Going at 20,000 miles an hour, becoming space debris.
That's a potential, and it's a real possibility of a hazard.
I can imagine.
But
there's so many
because
comments
it's going
you make
away
about
from
that.
them, it's actually ejected away because it's pressurized, so it gets out and away from the vehicles.
Okay, so what is
But there's always a chance of splatter.
Yes. So what is the real story behind the camera situation where it was reported they were taking them offline when they really haven't? What is the real story behind that?
Well, we all have mechanical problems, and so occasionally things break. It happens to all of us every day, and then things just wear out. Now, a few weeks ago, we had the SpaceX launch, which was the CRS-3. And what it is the CRS-3 was the third mission for resupply to the International Space Station from the SpaceX capsule, from the Dragon capsule. And so they've taken up more supplies. Now, on board were some brand new, extremely high-definition new cameras. And those cameras are now, this past week, were put in place, and they've been brought online, and you can actually go to NASA's website, and you can watch live and see, the in a full high-definition latest cameras to actually, see what is being seen off the International Space Station with these cameras.
In fact,
so the cameras weren't necessarily taken offline. It's that, they're being, taken care of maintenance-wise and being replaced.
Yes. In fact, this is the live view from the space station right now. They're in the dark. They're on the dark side of the planet, so you can't see anything. And it's this particular, and obviously you have the link. You can put it up on your website if you like. Mm-hmm.
This runs 24 hours a day.
Yes.
And, now that's quite a bit, for electronics. But they set it up just for you, the public, paid by our American tax dollars, so that you can see that we're actually up there and we're working.
Yes, in fact, there's just about 1,000 people watching it right now, watching a blank picture, waiting for the space shuttle or the space station to come around on the sun side. And if you watch this, it's on their Ustream channel. They actually have also have the audio of the radio broadcasts from the ISS as well.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that you can actually hear the sounds of space.
Mm-hmm.
But now you say there's 1,000 people, on there watching right now, and that's probably because the space station circles the Earth once every 90 minutes. So that means once every 90 minutes, you're going to get a wonderful sunrise and a wonderful sunset. And there's also trackers, so you know exactly where the space station is, so you can go on the Internet. There we go. So you know exactly where the space station is at this moment in time, and you can actually figure out when you want to see something specific, like you want to see a section of Saudi Arabia, and you just want to see the peninsula go by.
Yep.
You can do that, and you can plan for it, and you can go on to the Internet and watch live from the International Space Station, watch it fly by.
Yep. In fact, this morning around 6 o'clock, right here where I am in Michigan, the orbit took it directly overhead.
Yeah, it does a seesaw, and it doesn't stay in just on the equator. it goes up and down the entire section of the Earth, and eventually it does overlap everybody. So there again, you can track it, the International Space Station, and if it's at night and you know the time and the day, and it's coming over your house, you can actually go outside and look at it. It's going to be the brightest spot in the sky.
Yep.
Outside of the moon, of course.
And it moves fast. In fact, this website's called isstracker.com, isstracker.com. And right here you see the current altitude, and right here you see the current speed. And you'll see that the speed varies substantially, as well as the altitude, because it's in orbit, and of course there's mountains and things that it goes over, and they don't change the altitude constantly just to avoid mountains, because they don't have to. They're in orbit.
Well, another reason why the speed itself may vary is because they're in the dark. They're in extreme cold temperatures. I mean, we're talking temperatures that you couldn't survive here on Earth because it's just so cold. But as soon as it goes into the sun, you're talking, a couple hundred degrees now. So you're going to the complete extreme opposite end. So, and this is why we have the space suits, because they're completely environmentally controlled. Because if you weren't wearing a spacesuit, you would either be freezing to death, or you'd be boiled to death. If you were exposed to just regular space. So it's more than just about breathing.
Yes, it is. It's about temperature and pressure and water and there's so much that goes into being in a spacecraft. It's unbelievable. The average person doesn't realize how bloody complicated it is. It's not like hopping in your car and taking off and going to the store.
Every little bit is planned. Just like a fighter pilot. Every single second he's in that cockpit, he's got a plan. And he's got to document it all as well. Going out in space is no different. Especially when you're doing something like a spacewalk, you have to plan, and you have to make sure everything's working properly. Just last year, there was a problem, and they've instituted other safety measures now to combat this. There was one of the things that they do is they actually have a suit that they wear before they get into the spacesuit. Mm-hmm. And this is part of the environmental control system. And what it is it's literally a bunch of tubes that wrap around, their body, in a jacket or pants. And this is filled with fluid. It's filled with water. And that water, that fluid is regulated. And so what happened last year, we had an Italian astronaut who was in danger because his suit started filling up with water. He had a leak in that system somewhere. And so where it's supposed to protect him and keep him, either warm or keep him cold, depending on where they were at, when it came to the atmosphere, as far as, the sun, facing the sun, the system had sprung a leak and was now filling the spacesuit itself with water. And so that was one of the things where they were worried about. He almost drowned. And they did video of that. You can actually find video of that. And they've actually taken extra steps and extra measures, just like they always do, to try and figure out, how to prevent such a, because this is obviously something that they didn't plan for. They'd never had a problem before in all the years that, we've been doing spacewalks, which has been since the 60s that we've been doing spacewalks. So this was a new problem that they had to address and figure out a way to, fix and prevent such a thing from happening again.
Boy, that would be a heck of a decision to face when you're out in a spacesuit on a spacewalk. Do you want to drown, or do you want to open up your helmet and end it quick? Yeah,
not a decision that anybody wants to make, I'm sure.
No, that's just a creepy feeling, knowing that somebody was actually faced with that. Woo, it just gives you willies.
Yeah. And like I said, there's video of that. We can find that, and and you can actually see, the water rising up in his helmet.
Oh.
Now remember, they're weightless in space as well.
Right.
So,
yeah.
When you got that leak, it doesn't mean that the water is flowing down into his pants. That's not happening. No, it's floating around all inside that spacesuit too. So it's a little more, danger than normal danger, for somebody here on Earth.
Yeah. And if you're still watching the altitude marker over here on the right-hand side of the ISS, you see it's just come over the coast of Africa right now, and you can see that the altitude is dropping rather dramatically. It's dropped 4 feet in altitude in just the past 30 seconds or so. So it's over land. Of course, land is higher than water is, so it's losing altitude, which is just one of those interesting things that you can watch on the internet, and it's cool to spend some time watching.
And it's, there again, one of those little things that people in general just don't think about. It's just, you just don't think about it.
No, you don't.
So a little interesting factoid there.
Yes. Well, we've come to the end of the hour, and ladies and gentlemen, this has been a rather odd show because I just happened to email Lane a few days ago about this Russians kicking the U.S. off of the space station, and he replied back, so I can come on the show and explain it if you want. So there was no planning for the show, really, and the wife and I, we went out and saw Godzilla this morning, so I didn't get home till 2 o'clock, so this has been an hour and a half of show prep for me, and I think it came off rather well, Lane.
Yeah, there was another thing too that I wanted to address because just the week before this, came around. They were talking about the rocket engines on us as well.
Oh yeah.
Now I wanted to explain that the engines themselves are they're only for the Atlas-5, and that's a rocket that's actually launching next week. We're launching one of those from Canaveral. And the engines are called RD-180s, okay? And they're built by this Russian manufacturer, MPO Energomash. And so they've talked about limiting us and restricting us on that with part of the saber rattling. And we have a contract where only the Russians are supposed to be able to service the engines. Well, there again, this isn't a big deal to us. Boeing can service those engines as well. I mean, they know those engines inside and out. Pratt & Whitney know these engines inside and out. So does Rocketdyne. Everybody's had access to these engines here in the U.S. And so anybody who matters, anyways, that handles these type of things. And the other part is go ahead, don't sell us those engines. Guess what? We've got a 2-year supply. Now, by the end of those 2 years, yeah, we'll have a new engine online. One of our rocket companies here in the U.S. will have something to replace it. It will be fully tested, and it will be ready to fly. And guess what? 2 years, that's 2017. What are we going to be doing by then? We're going to be flying Orion with the SLS.
Yes.
The replacement for the space shuttle. We're going to be flying the SLS, replacing the space shuttle.
So all of this is
no real worries at all.
So all of this is essentially a non-story.
It's all smoke and mirrors, and strictly for politics. In the real world, just like most of what is reported these days, like the Kardashians, it means nothing.
Yeah, it means nothing at all. It's all for the low information voters, is what it's for. The low information people, so that they think there's the big bad Russians are doing something they shouldn't be doing, and the government's going to save us again.
Yeah, remember back in the day, they want the Cold War days back because that generated money. So the commies are coming.
Oh, good Lord! We could go on for another 3 hours about that. Holy smokes! We could go on for hours about that. Don't even get me started on that. I'll give you one clue, folks. Thorium reactors. Look them up. You know about thorium reactors, don't you, Lane?
Oh, yes, I do. And that's another thing, too. Another Russian wonderful invention. It sank a couple of their submarines. they've actually talked about that was discussed. Somebody brought that up because I brought up the engines. It actually ties in really because somebody says, "Oh well, the Russians are limiting us. Well, why don't we go to the thorium engines for to replace the Russian rocket engines?" It's like, well, you know what? That's just not going to happen. It's way too unstable, and it's just not going to work.
Yeah, it's but it's something they're working on. I know they're working on the Chinese are working on the thorium reactors.
That's the other thing too is China has their own space program that, believe it or not, the Russians are helping them. So the Chinese have a rover on the moon. They have aspirations to go to the moon, put man on the moon, so what are we doing? We're going to be chasing after asteroids. We did announce back at the end of April. I actually met and was talking with Charlie Bolden about it. That we are planning to go to Mars. We're going to capture Obama's asteroid because that's what Obama wants, and we do have plans to go to Mars. But we will be going back to the moon as well. There are a number of companies, private companies, that are interested in that. SpaceX, of course, they want to go to Mars, but they realize, it all takes steps, and so the moon is part of that plan. There are several companies out there. One of them is called Bigelow. It's a company out of Las Vegas, and they are known for they announced back, in the 2000s that they wanted to build a space hotel. They're using that same technology. Everything is inflatable for them. Mm-hmm. And so they want to go, and they literally want to send up balloons. So, and turn those into space stations and into moon ports. And if you go to their visitor center in north of Las Vegas, they actually have set up where you can go and look at their inflatable moon base, in their facilities.
Yes, I have actually heard of that. They're inflatable satellite modules that they intend to string together as a hotel in space.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things that are, and so we still have our eye on the moon. Granted, we need to pick up the pace a little bit, but other people do too. India, of all countries, just sent a probe out, to Mars, and they want to go to the moon. This is India, and so space is becoming more and more accessible throughout the world, and believe it or not, if you go and do a search for rocket launches, we are actually all over the world launching, between 2 to 3 rockets every week. And I just find that amazing, that, between the European Space Agency, Asia, because Japan's got their own space agency as well. Mm-hmm. It's just, they're launching from ships. They're launching from French Guiana. Russia's got 2 spaceports. We've got 3. A lot of people don't realize that in the Carolinas, there's Wallop. In Wallop, they launch smaller rockets, but they do launch rockets from there. We've got Vandenberg out in California, and we've got, of course, the Kennedy Center as well, which is tied in with Cape Canaveral. A lot of people don't realize that the Cape itself is divided. That pretty much everything in Complex 39, which is the Space Shuttle complex and the vehicle assembly building, that's all Complex 39. That is the public Kennedy Space Center. Everything south of there is Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. That's all Air Force. So when you see an Atlas V launch, you see SpaceX launch, you see the Delta IV launch, those are all launching from the Air Force side. And NASA shares that with them. So it all depends on the mission. The mission last night with the Delta IV that launched, that was for the Department of Defense, and that was a GPS satellite. I'm sorry. Next week next Thursday. There is a Department of Defense satellite that's going up for the NRO, and that's on an Atlas V. And those are controlled by the Air Force. Now, when SpaceX launched back in April, that went to the International Space Station. The International Space Station is controlled by NASA, so NASA controlled that flight. SpaceX has another launch that's coming up here real soon. It was supposed to go off earlier this month, and they had a static engine problem as far as their fueling. And so they delayed. Right now, tentatively, the launch date is on the 27th of this month, and but that's launching some private satellites. So there again, that's controlled by the Air Force and not by NASA.
It's amazing that we have that many space launches going on, and they're not covered because the media obviously thinks that nobody's interested anymore.
Yeah, and that's baffling. That because it's that active. I mean, this is 3 launches this month. From Florida. That's not counting what's going on. Oh, I forgot about White Sands. White Sands, they launched small rockets from there too.
Yeah.
And so technically, we actually have 4 spaceports. That our government launches from.
And don't forget about the private ones like Virgin.
Correct. And so where they don't launch, as much as we do, or as much as the government does, they are still launching. We've got, this is something relatively new that we've got private enterprise, private companies that are launching into space.
Yeah, it is amazing. And we have sadly come to the past the top of the hour, and
Yeah.
I need to let you go so that you can get on the road and do your photography work that you're supposed to be doing tonight.
Yep.
And I am going to actually go and make dinner at this point and thank my lucky stars that I have not lost my voice during the show, which to me is amazing considering I lost it twice today, which is astounding. So I want to thank you, Lane, for coming on the show on short notice, which is...
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, yes. It's believe me, the pleasure's all on this end. I love talking to you about space. It is one of my favorite things. And I'll let you go, and thanks for coming on the show, and I'll let you know where you can download the MP3 of the show so that you can put it on your site if you would like.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks for coming on, Lane, and we will talk to you in the near future.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you.
And there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That was Lane Hermann, space journalist extraordinaire. And I am Bill Zam, and we're about ready to end the show, which is what I'm going to do right now, as a matter of fact. All of the broadcast equipment has actually worked appropriately tonight. And incidentally, the reason why my face got so dark there towards the end of the show, let me do that. I'm using our new LED portable lighting system, and I had to put some used batteries in it because I needed the batteries for something else, and I haven't had a chance to charge them up on the little solar charger. So those lights are getting a little bit dim, so I've switched over to a daylight CFL bulb. So, at any rate, that's tonight's show. I appreciate all of you tuning in. It has been a fabulous show, and I thank Lane Hermann for coming on the show, and it's Lane Hermann with 2Ns.com. And we will see you all next week. Thanks for stopping by.